all
Yeah.
Yeah.
Set up or help out setting it up is more than welcome, and also any adults or children who want to come down and watch it fish are welcome.
You know when you're doing it?
Thank you.
What's that?
When you're doing it? Where you setting up?
I'll be setting it up, depending on the weather, sometime in April.
Nice. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to make public comment?
Is this the time to make comments about the Riverfront?
Preferably.
I live on Creighton Street. So, I didn't attend the show back in October, but I did watch the full 2-hour video and saw all the opportunities, and one of them is referring to opening up access to on Colonial Drive to allow people access to the woods and potentially put a bridge up, another pedestrian bridge across the river.
And an elevated boardwalk. My property abuts, as I said, Creighton Street and Colonial Drive, also the water treatment plant and the town woods. And the proposed location of the elevated boardwalk looks from the map like it would be literally feet from my house. And I've had nightmares ever since. It's beautiful. I love our neighborhood. It's somewhat hidden there, and people don't really know there's a street there. We know the neighbors, you know, and it's very narrow, one-lane roads, and they're not one.
People that live there all understand that, and it's the best place. I've been there almost 40 years now, and I love it there. And the thought of drawing more people in and traffic to our little area there
Would change the character, I think, of the neighborhood.
doing that because people that aren't used to cars going different ways on a one-way road and kids playing in the street there. I don't know if anyone did a sidewalk there, I suspect not. And even the property in the woods, because I'm like a little sliced into the woods there. So there's no way you could have a bridge. You would have to go over the water treatment plant itself, the way they laid it out on the map. Are they really thinking of doing that? And are they trying to attract more people into our neighborhood? You know, I love it up at Turning Point. I walk there. It's half a mile from my house. I don't need a bridge to, kind of a few minutes off of that walk. I don't really understand the point of that one. And I don't know how, it's just pie in the sky type thing or somebody's seriously considering it. But personally, and I don't know how the rest of my neighbors feel, but personally, I would be devastated. It would destroy any sense of privacy I had. To have this big looming structure, and it would be on the hill, I'm partway up the hill, looming over my yard and house. So I just wanted to make that clear, and I feel since I'm in the middle of this that I'm a stakeholder, and they mentioned they were letting the stakeholders know about, potential impacts, and certainly no one has contacted me, so I don't know if that's something for the future or what it is, but I'm very, very concerned.
Well, first off, I appreciate you making comment, coming and saying what you've said. So the purpose of the shred is, you had kind of mentioned, to paraphrase your words, pie in the sky or serious consideration.
Yeah.
The answer is probably in between the two. I mean, the goal of the charrette was to identify opportunities that may exist with the riverfront for increasing public participation.
Exactly. I
doing
understand
things.
that, yes.
But, you know, now it's that, the reality check is the next part of, you know, the on
Right.
the ground, how are people, you know, affected? And so, you know,
Exactly.
we have noticed at this committee level since the charrette, more people coming to make public comment, which is great. It's kind of exactly what we want of, you know, what is the feedback that folks are receiving, or, you know, what do people think of these ideas? Are they really for them? Are they really against them? And providing that feedback. You know, at this level, we're an advisory committee that, you know, ultimately makes recommendation or thought or proposal to town council to ultimately make other decisions. So right now is the time for just general feedback. What do people think about certain ideas? You know, what ideas does the town want to pursue further? And, you know, the implementation of those ideas would be further down the road.
That makes sense. I didn't get the feeling anyone did any walking through that area though. I've walked through those woods literally thousands and thousands of times with my dogs. So I'm very familiar. I'd be happy if somebody wanted to see it because, you know, you're looking at a map, you can't really tell what the structures are being used for down there. Used to be, when I first moved there, you could walk all along the river up the top there, behind where the water treatment plant is, and then they started fencing it all in. And it's actually fenced in a little ways onto my property, well, that's where the border is, so there's really not a way other than trespassing on my land, which I don't mind out because hardly anyone does it, but trespassing on my land to get up the hill from Creighton Street itself without walking up Colonial Drive to the top of the hill, which is not for the faint-hearted either. If you've been in the neighborhood, it's very steep.
It's in the pill. Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you very much for your comment.
Thank you for listening.
And understanding. Yeah.
Hi, John Bentley, 14 Brett Road. Kind of late in the game, so I got contacted last night by a few people, so I'll make a few comments. I've tried to read the notes that I saw today. I couldn't find them yesterday, so either the site had an issue or they got put on today. But first off, financially, you know, we need to do the correct thing. I was on council from 2011 to 2018. And we were still paying for things we had to do. Not nice to have things. We had to spend $13 million on a sewer plant by the EPA. We had to fix the dam. We had to do something at high school. Myself, my property tax runs $1,000 each year the last 2 years. So first off, I know I read a lot about grants and help. When I was on council, I was on a few years with Mr. Pike. You know, there was a bridge across the bridge coming across downtown. And there was gonna be all these monies available, federal, state, and we found out it really wasn't. And it's gonna, you know, everything comes down to dollars. So first, let's think about the taxpayers. Let's think about 90-year-old people on fixed incomes. And let's think about what happened on our taxes the last couple of years if we can. Again, there's nice to have things and there's need to have things. I'm all for recreation. I was on the conservation committee here. Having been on that before, there's also DES, New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services has RSAs. I wanted to find it, didn't have time to. Specifically when I read this, it talks about vegetation and pathways when you're within so many feet of the water, and I don't know what it is, but believe me, here at Point, you know, you can't just go in and take down trees and have viewing areas and sitting areas. Can't do it. It's not John Bentley rule, it's not a Newmarket rule, it's a state, and there's some federal rules also. So, also when I was on council, we had a lot of talk about Heron Point. We opened it, we closed it, there were people out there smashing bottles, young kids drinking, there were people out there walking the dogs, not cleaning up the waste, leaving the bags there. 2 different police chiefs while I was on, you know, spoke to us about the issues here. And at one point, they closed the gate, locked the gate, and said no trespassing. So again, we need to think, you know, hopefully we're talking to Chief Jordan, hopefully we're talking to Chief Pulaski and his 2 roles, Department of Public Works and Fire Chief, and finding out what their opinions are of this going forward. Because I know there's a lot of nightmares. I know it took resources of the police to go up there. It takes town resources. It doesn't sound like much, but now there's going to be some trash bins up there, and someone has to go empty the trash bins and hope the animals don't get it. And so I know that I just heard what you said. I appreciate that it's the beginning advisory, and I've certainly been around with it. But anyway, also, you know, I see a lot in this charter about rezoning and talking about rezoning to do things. I hope not, because deplorable thing next to the tracks over here that they let go. It's only 3-story structure, monstrous, and the one at connection, the intersection of 152 and Grant Road, and they put it 29 feet away from the house. Not the look of our community, so I hope we don't change things. You know, family's been here 380 years, I'm a little vested in this town, so anyway, I appreciate your time, I'll get more involved and I'll listen more. I'm coming in, like I said, I got emailed last night, coming in late in the game, but appreciate all you folks do and I'll keep my ears open. Thank you for your time.
Anybody else?
Would anybody else like to make public comment?
Would it be okay if I stayed seated, remain seated?
Yeah, the mic can travel.
Thanks so much, Bart. My name is Claudie Marston Minor. I live on Creighton Street. I have since 1998. And thank you for taking public comment and having this committee. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate all the great ideas and opportunities that have come up since the charrette. I'd like to reiterate a couple comments. One that Susan already made with regard to increased vehicular traffic in the event of opening up the town woods and inviting people through wayfinding to get over there. We already have quite a few drivers of vehicles who get lost. They think because of GPS they can cut through the Department of Public Works to get over to New Road. And you know, Susan's already mentioned how narrow our streets are, which is great. I love our narrow roads. But there's Colonial Drive, Creighton Street, Prescott, and Mount Pleasant Street would all be negatively impacted by increased vehicular traffic. I think that's number one. Number two, I think there may be similar issues that abutters would face or that the town would face with abutters along the length of Pinder's Lane, which is the historic name of the lane that runs from Colonial Drive all the way over to Young Lane and then continues on to Great Cove Road. Some of the abutters along New Road have expanded their yards and their chickens or whatever into the lane, which is fine. They allow us to pass through. But I think that, you know, clarifying who owns what to where might be important for those abutters, especially on New Road and Colonial Drive area. And I guess thirdly, I'd be concerned as, what's your name again?
John Henley.
John Bentley mentioned earlier, you know, the maintenance of any trails if they were formalized. I mean, I think they're very well used now, and making sure that they didn't get abused would be a concern of mine. I think I love those woods. I think everybody who uses them loves them, and keeping them open to public access is great. And it's that fine balance of inviting access without overuse. And that's all. Thank you.
I just would like to point out too that there is access to all, oops, sorry.
Yeah.
There is access to all these areas, so I don't know, when they talk about opening up access, as Claudia said, Pinder's Lane is perfectly clear. Walk up to the top of Colonial Drive and you can walk down this nice wide trail, which is essentially what it looks like, but there's no access, you know, being blocked currently.
Sure. What I think, for a point of clarification, I think potentially opening up access was used a little bit synonymously with more
Signage.
finding, or just awareness,
Signage and
awareness of
directions
existence.
is how
Yeah.
I'm seeing it, right? So
Yeah.
they will point those out.
Thank you for your comment.
If there are no more comments, I know by Robert's rules you don't need to recognize me as spoken. I'd like to speak at no one's one. I just got two kind of important items. We just spoke about Young Drive again. That's our emergency vehicle. That's where the fire department is. That's where the ambulance is. And I don't know that we want to welcome people bringing in kayaks and bikes and But that's one of the things, I got pieces of some of the meetings from people emailing me, so, I think that's a safety, could be a safety issue of kids on their bikes or walking, and you have the ambulances and fire trucks coming in and out. I'd be worried about the liability. It's a pretty rocky area. I smelled fish there for years. And another thing from the notes that I read today, it talks a lot about access for boats and kayaks. Well, we have one right next to Joyce's kitchen. It's a great place. I put my boat in there 500 times in my life. So I don't know what, if we think there's a bigger boat that needs to be put in, it's not gonna happen anywhere on Heron Point or the sewer plant. So I'm kind of questioning why we're worrying about where we can put boats and kayaks, and that's the ideal place, is parking at Shanda Park. So I don't know why we're looking at that. If you don't want to put in a boat there, that we, Lamprey River and Twin Rivers, public access is plenty of places. Lastly, on the Panda, the Sons of American Legion, we do a lot of events for this town. The money stays in the town a lot of times. And I know when we have some events, there's no parking, even including Shanda Park. It's kind of, overnight, and sometimes a lot of the people living in apartments are there, so parking's an issue too. So we need to think about that if we're opening up Cameron Point. Are they all over the trailer park? There's people here from Lamprey Trailer Park today. Some of them contacted me. So again, we need to think of all the other ramifications too. It's not everyone just lives at the mills and they want someplace to walk. You gotta think about people parking and dogs, and it mentions bike trails. So I think opening up access, we need to really see what that means. But again, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I actually do have comments. Hi, my name is Lynn Rogers. I live on Prescott Street. I wasn't planning on making any comments today. I just wanted to listen. But the last thing anyone in our neighborhood wants are more vehicles. Right now, we're dealing with the sewage trucks that are constantly going through our neighborhood. Not just the noise, it's the pollution, the exhaust that we're breathing. We've been complaining for over 5 years, and no one has done anything. Supposedly, the town is waiting for a part from Germany so that the trucks can turn around on the other side, off the New Road side. And we really don't have any answers to that. So the last thing we want are more vehicles. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you for,
Lynn Rogers.
thank you for mentioning that. I was gonna say that should be one of the top opportunities. It stinks out there often. When the
Sorry.
wind's blowing in the right direction.
I have to add. We've also been waiting for our roads to be redone for over 12 years. And apparently that can't be redone until the trucks stop coming through our little residential neighborhood. We have massive potholes. It's dangerous for children riding their bikes, runners that are out there running and landing in potholes and hurting their backs, including myself. I was carrying a box and ran into a new pothole.
Don't complain to the town manager, he says all.
Trust me, we complained to him and nothing has happened. But this is really more about vehicles and getting the roads fixed so those vehicles can stop coming through.
I understand, absolutely.
Would anyone else like to make public comment? Well, thank you for everyone. I mean, again, that, an engaged citizenry is the only way this kind of thing works. So thank you for the public comment. Again, for the record, anyone who may look up this meeting, after the fact, again, the public comment and the public participation has absolutely increased after the shred. I think that is, by design to a degree. It's nice to hear people's voices and to get that level of input. So I encourage anyone who has something to say to come and say it. So thank you. If there's no further comment, we'll move on with the remainder of the agenda. The next item would be acceptance of the minutes from December 9th. Joe, I did have one edit right at the start of page 2, towards the end of that line, it says an increase in public access. I think it should be access, but it should be minor.
Because public assets are good too.
Yeah, that was-
No, the taxes on
Close.
Yeah, somewhat. That would be my only other comment. Dale, I don't know if either of you have anything,
December, what was that, December 9th?
I'll second that motion.
Nice. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. First up would be further discussion of the master plan chapter development. So to invite Bart and or Liz.
So, Bart, I'm the planning director. So today, what we're doing is gonna build off of last meeting and review the 5 themes, and then within those themes, the main goals and sub-goals. So today is an opportunity for the committee to kind of give comments and refine this list that Lisa put together. And then from there, once we get clarification from the committee on what those will look like, then we'll proceed with chapter drafting. This is kind of the last part before we start that process. We are reaching out to other stakeholders too, specifically at Hare Point, the community right there. We're meeting them, I think, on Thursday at the library. So, you know, we didn't really have a presence of them at the charrette, so we want to make sure that their voices were heard. We are going to do that, and then once we, you know, conclude those conversations, again, we'll start chapter drafting, and then return to the committee to review that once we have a first draft. So, without further ado, I'll kind of pass over to Liz to help us guide through this conversation on these 5 themes and then the goals and stuff. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bart. Liz Durfee, I'm a planning consultant working in collaboration with Stratford Regional Planning Commission on the master plan, and specifically I'm working on the downtown Riverfront chapter, as all of you know. For folks who haven't participated in the master plan discussions to date, I'll go over the sort of the themes that each of the chapters are organized under, and just mention that we are looking at some of the input that came out of the charrette, but it is not the only form of public input driving the chapter forward. So it's a great resource, but there were some other master plan public input sessions, and we're getting feedback from this committee and some stakeholders as well. So what I'm going to do is first, I think, just breeze through the 5 themes in case folks aren't familiar with what those themes are. So every chapter of the master plan is organized through the lens of 5 separate themes, and those are kind of the main sections. And those are vibrancy, which means a vibrant community is one that exudes energy and is full of activity and life. It's welcoming and friendly to all ages, supports cultural diversity, provides economic opportunities. Number 2 is connectivity. A connected community has efficient and safe links to daily needs, such as between home, jobs, shopping, school, services, parks and open space, and provides welcoming and inclusive public spaces for social interaction. Accessibility. An accessible community has an environment that is meaningful and usable for as many people as possible. Affordability. An affordable community is where people can live comfortably without financial difficulty. And resiliency is a resilient community can withstand, recover, or adjust to adversity or change. So when we talk about the different topics that are in the downtown Riverfront chapter, we are sort of doing so through those 5 themes. And what I've done today is pull out an initial set of what we're calling primary goals, and that is what you have in this spreadsheet here. The first page has the draft goals for the downtown Riverfront chapter. you read the fine print in red there, you'll see that the other pages contain the primary goals as well as the sub-goals for the housing chapter. And I just included those as a reference so you can get an idea of what the quote-unquote primary goals and what the sub-goals are, which are more like the recommendations or action items. So they're going to be a little bit more specific. Every theme in each chapter is going to have one or more primary goal, and then every primary goal will have one or more sub-goal or recommendation. So I thought today I could get some feedback from all of you on what you think about these initial draft goals on page 1 here. And if it's all right with the committee, we'll just go one by one, and you can comment if you have any comments, or we can loop back to different goals if you think of something further down. So I have listed 3 different primary goals under the vibrancy theme, and those are celebrate the social, economic, and natural history of the downtown Riverfront area, incorporate arts and culture into Riverfront improvements and events, and maintain and enhance the amenities of town-owned properties. Any ideas, comments? I don't mind if you want to wordsmith things, if you want to say, I don't like it, but I don't have a great solution right now. However you want to best provide feedback.
No, I mean, I think that's it. I mean, obviously, this is kind of, workshopping ideas. But it's the first time I'm really reading through it. I would assume the same for the other committee members, are just kind of establishing that we're all sort of taking this in real time. But, yeah, no, I think you've captured kind of the overall kind of primaries of it. I mean, I think what's been clear through the shred, through the master plan events that the town's put on, through the community surveys, is everyone loves the riverfront. Like, it's a vibrant area. People like being in it. They like being around it. They like experiencing it. I think the divergence is always just in what any improvements or future looks like. But yeah, I mean, I think all of these things are very important. Personally, I'd like to see, maybe more signage or exhibits or historical things, like physically on the waterfront, especially, with the town's history as kind of a working town on the water. I think we have good stuff along, Main Street and 108 itself, but kind of bringing that down to the water itself as well. I love the idea of kind of like sculpture, interactive art, and trying to move that in with, some sort of improvement overall to Shanda Park. Shanda Park is great, and when I say improvement, there's larger concept ideas, but there's also just, is there an opportunity to maybe plan the space out a little bit better, as it's been used for concerts and other things, like there's a beautiful bench, but it's right in the middle of the entire space. Like, is there a better spot for the bench? Do we consider moving a tree or two to make more physical space for people to inhabit, down there for those events? Ideas like that. So that's just my personal 2 cents. Does anyone want to add on to that?
Kind of along with what you're saying, I think it would be easier for me, if we could just kind of like throw out what some of the sub-goals might be and see if it fits in with the main goal. And these are, when I throw them out, just kind of brainstorm what might fit in here as a sub-goal.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. When I was kind of drafting these primary goals, I was imagining that after the chapter is drafted and we start looking at the specific recommendations, these primary goals may have to get modified further. Do you have any sort of specific ideas you want to know now?
On the celebrate social, economic, and natural history of downtown Riverfront. So how can we, what can we do, or how can we, educate people? What can we do? Signage down at the Shanda Park, or something in the mill space, dedicated to the riverfront? And just kind of like throwing out what might go in there. How do we do that? So see if that makes sense. But certainly, I think we can do a better job of signage down at Shannon Park. The weir, I think, you know, I've been down there and people go, what is that? People have asked me, what is that? And I explained it to them.
There's a little plaque down there, but it's hidden behind a snow fence in the grass.
There is, but it's,
Well, they see the sign up there, you know, Jerry Collins, the weir, Chick's weir, and again, what are those sticks in the mud? You know, it's sort of.
Jumping back just quickly to Sam's comment on, kind of like the organization and design of Shanda Park. There are quite a few things that have come up in discussions and in public comment. I don't actually see a great kind of overarching primary goal related to the design specifically of Shanda Park, so that might be something we can move back on and see if that's not captured somewhere else in this list, that we might want something to kind of group those design elements. Because I remember the comments specifically about the bench and, you know, there's the snow fence blocking this and.
Raising it up.
I would think on accessibility and connectivity, there's, you know, we have kind of an overarching design of
Yeah.
how Shanda Park connects with everything going north to, you know, to the dam and going south to that area down there, down by the treatment plant.
Yeah, I was gonna just add in that on the maintaining, enhancing the amenities, it goes back to some of the design aspects you mentioned, because one of the problem spots from the get-go has been the understanding that Moonlight Brook is contaminated, it's not safe to be children playing in that little lagoon, especially in contact with that water. We've got tests that show that. So that a lot of the design element starts with the fact of correcting the flow of water in and out of that lagoon area, making that whole area cleaning. Before that, they're finding sources of contamination upstream. There's a lot of infrastructure, but I thought at the charrette, the idea of having a raised area that bridged both sides of the brook and created room for infrastructure in a way that can relate back to vibrancy. You could have a more permanent setup there that was useful when they have town concerts. You could have a good place for signage, and it could create more space in the whole Shanda Park area, which fills a lot of roles. So it can certainly use the space, and it's a place where you can have protected infrastructure because it'd be high enough to protect from flooding, which is going to be an increasing risk at the park as it is. And some of that will just be you accept that periodically will flood, and that's okay. But other things, if you're going to have some more permanent wiring in there, you're not going to want it to flood. So I think there's a place, maybe it comes in as a sub-goal of maintaining, enhancing the amenities that ties back in with that, specifically in the area of Shanda Park. Or maybe it belongs more under resilience, but a lot of these touch on more than one.
Yeah, that's been my struggle writing this chapter, drafting it, is figuring out what information to put in which section. So there's kind of a lot of overlap, and when the board reviews the chapter, the committee, then you can sort of decide if you want to move things around.
Yeah, I mean, I just, again, personally, through everything we've talked about, I think a primary goal, which falls under all five of these categories, is an improvement to Shanda Park, and how, ultimately, how substantial that improvement is more at the discretion of the town at large. But, talking about everything from, can you physically move a bench to are you replacing, larger style infrastructure and the underlying infrastructure like the culverts in Moonlight Brook and all of that. So I think a primary goal for the Riverfront chapter should be giving an improvement to Shanda Park and giving a thorough look at, what that improvement looks like, but kind of recognizing its, form and function as kind of a central public space in the middle of the downtown, right on the water.
wanna move down to the next section, connectivity? We can jump back too.
Yeah, I think so.
So I have establish a cohesive river walk, enhance the connectivity of Main Street, Commerce, and the Lamprey River. Seek creative solutions to strengthen connectivity of all town-owned properties in the vicinity of the downtown riverfront, and enhance the connectivity of the downtown riverfront with the broader region.
Certainly under enhance cohesive river walk, under the sub-goal definitely has to be that we have to come to an agreement with the Rivermore Landing people as to public access.
Yeah.
And then there's probably a couple of other places too, going south, that we need to enhance our relationship with whoever owns the property and, easements that are
Yeah.
required.
Improvement of signage and wayfinding, I think, is an important sub-goal for connectivity, for identifying where people, can go, but equally as important, maybe where they can't go.
Mhm.
And I think that's where you get benefit on both sides, is trying to direct the public where they have right to be and away from where they shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
In terms of other connectivity sub-goals, the other one that's coming to mind, part was what you and Ellen were working on, was just general connectivity, like to other communities, but that might just be more the downtown region in general, of just trying to promote that connected, contiguous access, be a bike up to like Durham or over to Exeter, things like that, more community connectivity to the area.
So we had talked about, and in the charrette, some of the conversations about connectivity were the Rivermore Landing piece. There were some conversations about where the public was and was not supposed to go through the Bryant Rock condominium area. We talked about the different options for accessing Heron Point. And at the Conservation Commission meeting earlier last week, there were some discussions about different ways to access Heron Point. The bridges kind of, from the charrette, fall in that discussion of, options to explore. Those might not end up in the chapter or the recommendations, but they were things that had come up. And then some of the signage pieces, those were kind of like the main highlights for connectivity. Potentially exploring connecting different ways in the vicinity of the Creighton Street pump station, or to access the other town-owned property. And then I think that was it for most of those little points. We talked about accessing the dam park. We're utilizing that property called the dam park, that's what it's called in the charrette, right above the fish ladder. And then during the charrette, some of the different concepts that were explored for the waterfront in the sort of Chinburg, Rivermore area were sort of within Penstock Way, and then also looking at boardwalk options. And I think the Conservation Commission sort of talked a little bit about boardwalk options to Heron Point as well. So all kind of a lot of different ideas to explore and feel out a little bit in the chapter.
Definitely, I'm kind of just looking through the sub goals a little bit from the housing chapter, and they are fairly specific. So I wonder if we're getting specific enough right now. Like, do we need to be more specific in some of the things that we're talking about?
For the sub goals,
Yeah,
I think the sub goals will be pretty specific. They'll almost be like discrete projects that the plan will say, all right, Riverfront Committee, you're tasked with doing this. You know, Bart, this is your job, you know, this recommendation is targeted at you. Go talk to Rivermore Landing and, you know, X, Y, Z. So it'll be pretty specific. You know, more full sentence fleshed out
sure.
recommendations.
Is there any, I think one of the ways, I mean, what have we been at this, 3 years, some of us on the roof, more or less, so I think it, maybe for some of the people out there, it's worth remembering, this all started sort of with a UNH report by students there, and the headline was a pedestrian bridge, but pretty quickly when we got it and started meeting as a group, it was apparent that major things were the infrastructure that was needed in Shanda Park. That was an area of big needs that had deeper problems. And the second was connectivity issues, which, you know, those were unresolved, and we recognized those had to be resolved. And I think this really gets to the heart of the connectivity part of it, as it goes through there, you know, it really gets to the heart of what we've talked about. And I think some of this, even as a committee, we sort of finessed it by saying, well, you know, we can't tackle all of this at one point. So I always thought of it in terms of what is it that's right up front, phased in first, we need to solve. You know, the problems with pollution at Shanda Park and all of that, that's in the works, and that's something I think is on the right path. The things about connectivity, I think almost the connectivity part, you know, going back to when Mike Hoffman was on the committee and he had deep experience with some of these areas, and we were talking about, oh, how nice it would be to have a pedestrian bridge over to Moonlight Brook, and over to Heron Point, and it would connect everything, but Mike was pointing out at that time that there's walking trails available, and if they just had a better, more attractive connectivity for those walking trails in that area to go through and into Shanda Park, it would connect better. And I think whether bridge is ever built, and I have never given an opinion as to whether I thought there should be a pedestrian bridge, despite what my wife has expressed to me strong opinions about that. But I think if it were ever to happen, it would be something that happened because the town wanted it at some point, a future point. And I don't have to decide about that. But I think it makes sense to connect what we have down there and what we can in an attractive way. You can't have vehicles where you don't create parking. There's not a lot of parking in any of these areas. So I think you have to figure out parking, but you don't necessarily have to put a lot of parking down there near the waterfront or on these walking trails. And, you know, there is I don't think it's really a landing, but it is worth remembering down by Young's Lane, you have a fish and game landing now that was clearly intended for the smelt fishermen. And it's not a very good boat landing, but it is a very pretty public access point.
I was gonna say, is that accessible to the public?
Yes,
Yes.
yeah.
A dog?
Yeah, the fishing game, it's a funny thing because it's officially a fishing game landing and it has a kiosk there. And the kiosk has fishing game signs they usually put up on boat landings.
Yeah, I know the kiosk, but I've never seen a dock.
It's not
There's
done.
There's no dock.
Oh, I thought people were saying there was a dock down there.
No.
It's just, you could easily launch a kayak or a canoe from there.
People do,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
locals put their kayaks down there and leave them, right?
No.
I
Sorry,
feel
I
like-
I misunderstood. It sounded like it was a dock or something. I've never seen
No.
one down there.
No, but I think in the fishing game parlance, it's kind of classified as a boat landing, but it's not a good boat landing. And I think what it was used for then, and I'm just making this as a guess based on what the signage is it probably was an access for smelt fishermen, back when smelt fishing used to be something you could expect ice in the winter more frequently than we now get.
That's
So,
where they stored the old pedestrian bridge that came down in the Mother's Day
I
flood.
know that.
I don't know if
I know
I
that
think
piece
it's
of
gone,
history.
but I was there for a long time.
Not to keep this going, but we did walk those, we had, members of it, we did sidewalks on the trails out there, like,
Yeah.
I've done it at least 3 times.
They used to store some fishing shacks out there too.
Yeah.
Right, well, that goes
Yeah.
back to the smell fishery.
There's no ice anymore.
Yeah,
on that
so
face.
I think that was one of the things that seemed like, to use the expression, low-hanging fruit. That part of the connectivity to town lanes, to make it clearer where people can go and should feel fine to enjoy it, well-marked, and everybody can enjoy that. It's just a little bit more picked up and signed, because some of those trails are confusing out
Right.
there. I think that would be a nice outcome, and if you can make your way to the downtown, you can not only enjoy Shanda Park, but you can take a longer walk. And that's kind of the vision. I think it's well within, a decent walk if anybody wants to go over to Heron Point by walking. It's possible now, and it's not a bad walk to park it on Bay Road and go down there. So I don't think there's an urgent. It would be nice to have a better solution so you could park at Heron like it used to be, but you have to solve, any of these things require a plan for vandalism and things like that.
It's literally a 5-minute walk from
Right.
the mills. I do it all the time.
I am not arguing with you. I am not arguing with you. So I think the first phase of what we're doing is to take the places that are public now and people are using and make it clearer and more attractive to get from point A to point B. And I think if we emphasize that, then some of the other things will wait for more consensus.
Is there a phased plan in this? I mean, you kind of get into the phasing of this.
In our mind,
Right. Right, but if you phase it, then the small things become achievable while you're planning for the grand rebuilding of Shanda Park, for
It's a
example.
big
right?
plan.
Which is more money and time, and you have to work that out, but if you phase small bits, then you kind of get your way there.
that's what we're doing now, really, is it's a master plan in the plan.
I would just add, I think at this point, we're just, what is it that we want to do? Then once you know what you want to do, we figure, okay, what's the time frame for doing that?
Yeah.
I do have a question on the term broader region, just to clarify the definition. To me, that's meaning connecting to, say, like trails that go to Durham. Is that
Yeah, so
what we're
that,
talking about there?
yeah, that came out of some conversations, at the charrette, and then some of the other public input that talked about connecting to, areas that are used by cyclists, commonly to try to get from, safer routes to get like from the rail trail all the way to Bay Road. And then, I think at one part, Bart was talking about connecting some conservation lands, but making sure that the riverfront is tied into those lands as well. People complain about trying to bike through downtown and looking at, are there ways to get around doing that?
So the bottom line is broader region defines an area outside the riverfront. What is outside technically the scope of what we're actually looking at right now is connectivity to it.
Yeah. Are you comfortable with?
I'm fine with that, I just want to make sure that everybody's on
Yeah,
the same page.
I can clarify that a little bit.
Can I just say that the way Shanda Park looks now, I live at the top of the hill. I've been there for 20 years, and it's always just struck me as more of a memorial than a place where people go. Just,
Can I
that's,
ask you to repeat it, just on the mic, just because if anyone's watching
Oh, I'm
on the
sorry.
broadcast, it won't be- thank you, thanks.
It's on.
thanks. I just wanted to say that it strikes me as more of a memorial than it does a place where people go. And if you could increase the traffic in that area where families might go to have a picnic, and God forbid we could put a play structure up there and bring kids in who just play, that eventually people would see more of where the area goes and where they can go from there. But in a small way, it becomes more populated, more visited more often, but not just to sort of take a walk through that very little path that's there. And if that means picnic tables or small tables where families can come and spend an hour and their kids can climb on something for a little while, that might build up the traffic that you get there, and then from there, they start trail walking or being in other parts of town.
Thank you.
It's great input, and I actually agree 100% with that. So the idea of, yeah, like, can Shanda Park be redesigned, like interactive art and stuff like that? I mean, I have 2 young kids, like, we'll go places
Right, and
to
I was
do
gonna
stuff,
say, yeah,
and
who
we'll
are we
spend an hour
trying to
doing it,
get
and then we'll
to
spend 2
come
hours
there?
climbing on something outside. So, like, having something where people can interface with it, I think is important. So, yeah, I mean, sub goals, you know, going back to vibrancy, yeah, like, is there an opportunity to you know, integrate some sort of interactive art or sculpture, I think is one. For connectivity, I feel like we beat that one up a little bit, so we want to kind of move on. But, you know, improve signage, improve wayfinding. Something I think the town may be in the process of that I think should be a written sub-goal is review of the easements, deeds, site plan approvals for the adjacent properties. So that was something that came up at the Riverfront. And I think having a clear understanding of what is actually on paper is important as you talk about connectivity of any of these areas. We kind of strayed into accessibility a little bit with the Heron Point conversation already, so I feel like you kind of hit on that, but I think something that came up at the Conservation Commission meeting was, you know, is a direct sub-goal approaching some of the property owners, you know, right there off of Bay Road to explore, you know, options for easement or access, you know, in or around those properties. So it's not just using the current road to the mobile home park to reach the gate. I would think that could be a direct listed sub-goal. And I think, you know, continuing to assess other connectivity options like the bridge is a sub-goal. You know, obviously, I think I kind of agree with everything Dale said on that. You know, that was something that came up in the original charter of this committee. I think people have strong opinions of it, to put it mildly. You know, and at risk of going on record, I think it's a cool idea because I don't live there. And I'm a civil engineer, and I think there's some cool things about it. I think we would be remiss to say, and you know, that public sentiment, I think, has been more on the negative side so far. Does that mean all public sentiment goes that way? I don't know. I think we're still trying to hear those voices, but continuing to assess if there's an appetite for the town holistically to consider that, I think remains a sub-goal.
Yeah, and I guess for the connectivity piece, one of the things that I think we'll have to do is take a look at I'll write up a little bit about all of these different sort of connective points, and then the committee can decide if you want to even keep that narrative in or not, and then the next step is, do you want a specific recommendation for that? So the chapter might mention, like, you know, a bridge is a theoretical idea. You may not end up with a specific recommendation to even look at that in the next 10 or 20 years. So it's really what everyone feels comfortable with.
I feel like the more we do connectivity through the area, improving the walkability and connectivity to the best it can be, that keeps all the other options open for some. You know, that would be the work of this next decade or so, you know, and then you see where you are and how people feel about it then, you know, things are going to change. That's a reasonable goal for us, really.
So under accessibility, we have ensure that all community members have access to the riverfront, improve water access points for motorized and non-motorized watercraft, continue to seek solutions to improve access to Heron Point Sanctuary.
To address something that Mr. Bentley said, the rec department currently rents out kayaks, and they have had issues with people, elderly people, trying to get into kayaks that they rent out. And so definitely one of the things that we want to do is improve a kayak launch type thing.
Would definitely agree with that. That's something that came up at the shred, I think is a relatively, straightforward idea to improve accessibility, improve maybe the town's existing kind of dock area and docking structure to allow that to be more readily, used by the public and people that need that.
I put that under connectivity also in a way, there's a tie to that. Maybe you don't put it there, but, there are a lot of people in Newmarket, a lot of them are out at Moody Point, but a lot of people are using the river for kayaking a lot, and a lot of other folks are using the river for boating a lot. And I think, as you imagine other developments happening in the future, Dover has a huge development and stuff like that. There are, I've done it before, where I kayak from Durham over to downtown Newmarket. You can kayak in lots of places and they're fun. And if we have more width perhaps at the current boat landing, it's way wider. And so I think there's space there, and it's all going to come under the redesign. But you could have something, I've been to Shanda Park watching people, I won't call them older, I'd say people my age, really struggling, currently they face, do you wade through the duck poop, or do you try to climb out of a kayak on the town? Those are tough things. And I think we want that to be just a more enjoyable experience if people enter. They might be coming to Newmarket from somewhere else, or using this area to access the wider Great Bay through the waterway. And either way, we would like it to be better.
One of the other docks that came up was the dock over at Bryant Rock. And that is a town-owned, I believe. Trying to figure out who owns that, but I know it's
Again, that gets back to that issue of who owns what and what's accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Does that have an official name that you know of?
No.
I know that I've used it, and people have told me that it's private, but I've used it, my grandson's used it.
I'm pretty sure there's a sign, a privacy sign. Or there, at least there used to be one.
There's a sign that says please pass through respectively or something.
Yeah, and then the dock itself said it's for the residents of the building.
I think the town has a deed.
I think there is access to that dock.
And I think that all kind of goes back to the sub-goal, just
Clarify.
Yeah.
I think these need to be,
Lines.
re-reviewed, just so it's abundantly clear. Just because the basis of any future discussion, I think, has to rest on
Well,
common understanding.
Yeah, and it may not be, I can't imagine wanting to launch a kayak there. So I don't, I can remember early on in the discussion, somebody said, well, we have a kayak launch over there, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me what they were talking about, and I think they were talking about that dock, but that's not an easy place to get.
You have to probably carry it from the Bay Road lot, but if the parking lot at Shanda Park is full, then that
Yeah.
would be,
But it's still a tough thing to, the athletes can do almost anything, but for me, carrying a kayak down a gangway and to a dock and then putting it in the water and climbing in, seems like not the easiest.
Right.
I've done something close to that. So I don't know that would be part of the process, is figuring out if the town owns it, then we want to figure out, well, what do we expect to use it for? Because I don't think it's a kayak launch, and I don't know what other use we can get out of it.
The grandson's gone down there and gone fishing off of it. I don't think he caught anything, but
Yeah, well, and just to know, then, I think it's important then that if it's available to the public to go out there, because we pay for the dock, then you can't put up a sign that says public can't go here. So those are things that have to be resolved, but I think the heart and soul of public access is going to be Shanda Park, and others are supposed to, would be intended to keep the public impact for being less, because it's not kind of unencumbered. It's not useful in that way. And I think that's all part of what the next phase where we start to make decisions about it.
I think an important part, and just the distinction here, right? I was just gonna add to this, maybe tides is something to consider, right? Because none of Shonda Park is available for kayaking at low tides, right? Unless you're walking on the mud, opposed to that other dock you're talking about, which is available. So just a note to consider accessibility of tides in that.
Yeah, and that might be a good point. I mean, maybe it just seemed unusable to me, and I've never seen anybody use that.
Limited, sorry, yeah.
But to your point, I think, the town dock down below, for example, it's a lot closer. I think you can get in there at low tide though, you can't get there at low tide?
Depends on how
the
low.
public dock.
Yeah.
No, it's the dock sits in the mud at low tide, and that, in the worst cases, which I think you'd want to plan to, is zero water.
Yeah.
So any improvements there, just maybe considering extending it a little bit.
Right, it's not far off from it.
Yeah.
I confess, I go through there a lot, but I don't usually go up through there at dead low tide.
Yeah.
But I know I have taken my boat up and down at low tide. There's water there, so it's not far from there.
Not far, but from the public dock in Shonda Park, you can't
Yeah.
get there at low tide.
But I, to your point, and I think we're agreeing that it probably make more sense to put more improvement into the Shanda Park kayaking access so that it was more robust. And I think that was something that there were ideas in the presented in the Charette team, what they came up with on that. And I think there's a lot of stakeholders that will have opinions about that, but it would really add to the vibrancy of the downtown and connectivity. I think it would be great.
And I think continue to seek solutions to improve access to Heron Point. That's covered in other areas, I think. What I would maybe like to see there instead, and I don't know whether it fits here or somewhere else, but I think we, at some point in time, need to decide, or who maintains Shanda Park and the Riverwalk area. Who's responsible for maintenance? Right now, I think that's kind of like Conservation Commission has some part of it, Public Works has some part of it, and they don't always talk.
I came up with a Conservation Commission meeting last week too.
Yep.
Discussion about, oh yeah.
Do you guys agree with that, or they're putting something like that in here?
So I had pegged that under vibrancy, under the maintaining the town-owned properties piece. But it could certainly go under, I tried to put the town-owned kind of property maintenance stuff under there, and then maybe a little bit in affordability too.
I think some of that, if we get further along in this, I don't think there's much disagreement. I've heard Ellen say she doesn't really think it belongs under the Conservation Commission. It doesn't really belong under their direct responsibility. It belongs under Public Works. So I think we may have to do some wordsmithing in some document somewhere, but nobody's really seems to be disagreeing that would be.
Yeah, but should that be part of our master plan to get that straight away, or no?
I think so. I would say, I agree, and I think really the purview comes more from the Conservation Commission with ultimate concurrence by the town. So I think for what gets into the Riverfront chapter might be more a little more vague, but more along the lines of explore current stewardship of Shanda Park and potential opportunities to better define responsibilities.
Yeah.
So something like that leads to it is a goal, but it's not necessarily this chapter where it's ready to push it.
Yeah, I think it's okay to have it as a recommendation, even though you wouldn't necessarily be the entity implementing it. I'll check in with SRPC to see if it fits within one of their chapters, but if they're focusing on open space and stewardship, they're probably not really touching on Shanda Park. to begin with, so, you know, we'll make sure it's not too redundant in chapters, but I think it's fair to put that in, especially since it's something that people have discussed and it's sort of on the horizon of things to do.
And I think, though, what is related to the maintenance is, you know, where we resolve the public has a right to at least pass through, where there is a river walk or anything like that, that all of those places will require a maintenance plan to make sure they're attractive. And if in some places these are a part of a negotiated plan that comes between the abutters and the public areas or the property owners and, you know, whatever is worked out for those type of things, there also has to be a maintenance plan as to how things are going to be maintained, how they're going to be kept attractive, and in any area we can do that. So I think there is that's an important part.
Okay, so I'm striking the third item under accessibility tentatively, because we have that somewhere else.
It may generally fall under connectivity.
Yeah.
But, yeah, there are people who are going to move on to affordability. Sure. I generally like your primary goals, especially the third one. Again, I think that's important that to best maximize the town's fund, you know, as we've heard via public comment, if you're talking about doing sort of any of these projects, I think having concurrence and, you know, pooling of resources for these is the best way to do that. So I think that's fantastic. I'm not sure I really have any defined sub-goals, honestly, just reading through this. Does anybody feel like they have one and feel strongly about something?
Well, I think a lot of the primary goals under affordability are things that touch on things that we're addressing in other places, you know. And like number one there, the free and low cost programs. If we're going to make improvement in Shanda Park that allow for more infrastructure in there, that make it easy to set up for music events and easy to do things like that, that are things that are currently being done, but you could, you know, create a better stage for that, so to speak. That goes to affordability in terms of that first primary goal. But I'm not sure how we can put those in there, but there is an infrastructure element to that comes in. And I think the public-private partnerships, we're at early days of that to see where there's wins out there that maybe enhance all the other things we're trying to do with it, so that everybody feels happy about the outcome. That would be the goal.
Yeah, maybe everyone can kind of think on that one a little bit, see if anything comes to that, comes to them on specific sub-goals out of affordability.
I think one thing is going to be, for the third item there is maybe developing like a schedule for, like a sequencing plan for some of the things. You know, there'll be some general timeframes for some of the implementation items in here, but like a big picture plan for, like work plan that expands different departments and boards is something that's not going to be within the scope of what we can do in this chapter, but that's probably an action item if you want to work on kind of that integrated planning piece.
I would agree with that, and actually something that was discussed at the Conservation Commission meeting too was moving this, either this committee or establishing a new committee, like instead of an advisory committee, a more permanent one to address that exact thing, a schedule and implementation plan. I think that should be a sub-goal that gets explored. You know, if the town ultimately decides that they want to commit to that.
I would think that first thing we wanna do is just prioritize what we wanna do, and then once you've got to prioritize, then you can fit in a schedule.
Yeah. But to go back, Joe, on the, you know, that a lot of those, before you get a final plan about Moonlight Brook, you know, that you kind of are, I don't know if you have to wait for that much, but there is.
You don't always have to wait for everything to be done. You
Right.
certainly can do the signage while they're still working on,
Right.
Moonlight Brook, and you can develop a plan, okay, once Moonlight Brook is addressed, here's what we wanna do above it, whatever.
That, I think all of that is part of the schedule, though. You know, what can we start planning on now, because Moonlight Brook isn't going to change the outcome of those plans and what things. So, because those are the, getting to know what you're going to do in broadly in Shanda Park is going to affect everything else in around that area. So it would be nice to know when you expect to start to really bring forward, this is our preferred plan. Whoever is making that decision at some point are gonna have to start to have an idea about what the preferred plan is for, are we raising up an area, you know, replacing the culverts with a raised area. Start to put something, and I think some of that might come out of the charrette to me, right? Are they gonna have more detail than what we saw before, or is it pretty much what we saw?
That's a good question. Hey Bart, do you know on the short report, it's not gonna have much more detail, but there is going to be a final report. Do you know
Yeah,
if they
it should be
finished it?
coming out soon, probably
Okay.
February.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's something we can kind of continue to discuss. Yeah, what those improvements look like. But schedule implementation plan is the sub goal. And then, yeah, maybe we can move on to resiliency, just because I want to your time as well. Two big things that come to me for resiliency would be explore the feasibility of living shoreline as part of the general improvement down there. Just better than hardscape, has water quality benefit to it as well, and is better susceptible to the actual flooding things that happen right now.
I could add that specifically into the third item,
Yeah.
or
I
make it
mean,
a separate item if
I
you want
guess
separate.
it could go into that. I think, exploring feasibility of living shoreline, I think is important. I would add it also as a sub-goal is, continue to define what, an infrastructure project looks like for Moonlight Brook, which I think the town's already well on their way to doing. They're doing all the proper steps to lay that foundation, but I think that now is the time to put that as a sub-goal of continue to walk that road and make a coherent plan for what that improvement looks like.
Yeah, it seems like it's a good place for a specific sub-goal, at least, because it would fall under climate resilience to have, because one of the things they discussed at the charrette was more vertical living shorelines. In other words, you're not planning to take up a whole lot of space in that living shoreline. You're trying to have something that has a living element, but also the element of a fairly vertical wall in there, so you can maintain the space within the park.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be somewhat different. There's also been the discussions around protecting the town infrastructure down at the sewer treatment plant by a living shoreline there. And then there may be different design elements over those, but those could be like two different sub-goals, because those are important infrastructure resilience and also have a whole lot to do with what the aesthetic of the area is going to be.
Okay, so we could add the explore feasibility of living shoreline as primary goal?
I still think the
Yeah.
I think it can be a sub-goal
Okay,
to
sub-goal.
your third bullet still.
Well, it's also a
Flag it as
sub-goal
a
to the
question.
first bullet, isn't it? Or do you think it's more?
Oh. Yeah, maybe both.
I mean, yeah, I think as long as everything gets captured, hopefully in the recommendations, that
has been.
no one's gonna say like, well, that wasn't under that goal, so you can't do that. So hopefully, like, the chapter will line up enough with like your sub goals, and there's a lot of hierarchy. But I think as long as we get some consistency between like the narrative, what themes we plug the goals into, and then, so things can sort of line up. If people want to read more about living shorelines, they're going to look in the resiliency section of the chapter.
Do you think you got what you were looking for today?
Anything missing that you think? Well, if anything comes up, then
Yeah,
we'll
I
write it
think
down.
enough to, you probably got enough to see one. Or are you planning on coming to the next meeting?
Yep. Yeah, I can come to the next meeting.
Should be February 10th. Record.
Do we know if we will have the final charrette report before that next meeting?
I wouldn't.
That's tough to say. I mean, when they said 10 to 16 weeks, something like that, 8 to 10 weeks maybe, from the charrette.
I think it's in December originally.
No, it was later. So I anticipate at the end of the month or beginning of February. So it's going to be probably right around the time the next meeting is. But I can check in with Tiffany and see what their anticipated timeline is at this point.
Well, but if we don't have to, are we okay with having our next meeting before we have the final charrette?
I think
Yeah.
so.
I was at the charrette, and I do actually have access to all of the material, presentations and things, so not the final report, and not certain pieces that people submitted afterward, but a lot of the material is available.
Okay. So it's informing the chapter development, even if the town doesn't have it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess the plan for February would be to kind of review sections of the chapter, and then after we make it through that, I'll come up with a detailed list of sub-goals, and we can kind of do the same thing we did tonight, and you'll get everything in advance, and I can even try to get the chapter more than a week ahead.
Thank you. I think that sounds excellent to us. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for the input.
So just moving on to two other things here, but kind of fairly short order here. So annual town report, write-up for the committee is due. I think the original request was within this week. So I drafted something kind of based on what was in there last year with an update on some of the primary stuff that was done this year. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to read it. I guess just let me know if you have any comments either now or within the next 2 days. As I'll try to submit that to
I read it, I thought it was great.
I did too. Yep.
Joe, any thoughts? Have you had a chance to look at it?
No, I didn't look at it, I was probably fine.
Fair enough. Yeah, just if anything strikes your fancy, I'll wait 2 days and then I'll give it to her Wednesday or something.
I mean, it's no different than what you passed before, right?
This is the same version I sent in a week.
Is the clipboard down there?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
No,
All right,
there you go. So no, this is exactly what I sent 10 days ago. Okay, I'll submit Wednesday if I don't hear anything else. And then, just the last little thing, Ingrid, Joe, and I were at on Thursday, but just as a general download, I think it went pretty well. It was mostly just trying to open up some conversation with them, primarily as we talked. I spent a lot of time talking about Shannon Park and Heron Point. They think, I think there's general concurrence between us and them about certain things. And definitely wanted as a forum to start kind of talking about okay, is this the time to start advancing some sort of, process to move Shanda Park out from the stewardship of Conservation Commission into the town as a whole, which there seems to be general agreement on with that, so. So yeah, I don't think anything, groundbreaking. I don't wanna sell it short if anyone disagrees, but I think it was just mostly conversation and concurrence, which seems to exist.
Looks good. I read the document, but it looks good.
Yeah, and it was nice that did see all of that info grouped together, because I think Ellen has a really good beat on all the past history of the Shanda Park and the resolutions and the deeds that originally created and transferred the park, so.
Yeah. Sounds
Excellent.
like a good meeting. I would have liked to have been there. I had
Yeah. So our next meeting would be, February 10th. So that's second Monday, so February 10th at 4 o'clock. Would be the next meeting. And with that, anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.